Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my video going over the hero talent trees for all the tanks out so far on War Within Alpha. It's going to be pretty quick. Just going to quickly talk about all the tank hero talents and how to think of each of them and how strong I guess they are right now. So we'll start with Blood. Sand Lane, I think, actually is the strongest hero tree of all of the hero trees out right now. My Blood Decay was killing my test pull in the Rookery in like 1 minute 15, whereas every other tank was killing it in 2 minutes. One of the things that makes it so crazy is this: when you use Vamp Blood, you start getting this buff called Essence of the Blood Queen, which is 150% stronger than normal. So you have this buff the whole time, but when you use Vamp Blood, it auto-procs it and it makes it 150% stronger. So that basically means you're getting 26.5% haste, like, permanently. You bridge go Vamp Blood, and then once your Vamp Blood falls off, you have like quote-unquote 20 seconds left on Vamp Blood, but then you have Red Thirst, so you just instantly get it back. If you're playing Umbilicus, you should have either Vamp Blood or Umbilicus active the entire time. Meanwhile, this is giving you like massive damage because you have more haste, and it's also making your Hard Strike stronger by Vampiric Strike. If you guys remember Blood Decay in Season 4, it actually feels pretty similar, except you have Vamp Blood instead of Rune Weapon as your like quote-unquote uptime buff, but it still feels real nice. It feels so strong. Hopefully they don't change it too much. Next is Deathbringer. Deathbringer basically gives you one extra skill called Reaper's Mark. It feels a lot like a Covenant ability where you just use it and then it does some cool stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really just damage. It has some small amount of resource gain in the form of free Marrow Rends. Basically, whenever it falls off, it gives you a free Marrow Rend. And it also has some DR because there's a passive here called Rune Carved Plates. And whenever you spend runes or runic power, you get reduced physical and magic. You should probably have max dex pretty much the whole time if you're actually fighting stuff. So it's just 10% reduced damage, which is cool. Next, we'll go over the Demon Hunter. So far, we only have the Eldrazi Reaver. And also one thing is we're losing the Season 3 tier set. So VDH does take a step back by losing that tier set. And this hero talent tree just feels so clunky to play with. Like, if you've ever played VDH, you know that every single global you have is extremely valuable. Like, you want to be generating souls, spending souls, especially if you're playing Spirit Bomb. If you're not spending souls, then you want to be using it on Sigil. But this basically makes you use Throw Glaive, Soul Cleave, Fracture. I mean, the Fracture is kind of fine, but Throw Glaive and Soul Cleave often are not abilities you want to be using as part of your like soul economy. And this kind of sets you back just to activate the hero talent. VDH in itself is still pretty strong. Like it was easily able to survive the pull that I was testing on, unlike some other tanks. But this hero talent tree just feels super clunky and not fun. Next, we'll go over the Druid. So both Guardian ones are out. Druid of the Claw. Basically, sometimes your Maul turns into Ravage, which puts like a pretty big dot on everything. And you're also able to switch into cat form and put up Rip and Bite. So the thing is, on AoE, Rip and Bite aren't really that useful because, there's just single target skills. So I think this is more of a raid pick. For Mythic Plus, I don't see it being that strong. You can still play it, obviously, but I think it's a lot weaker than Moon Bear, which seems to be very, very strong. So we'll go into that next. Elun's Chosen. This basically makes your Lunar Beam an insane cooldown. Every time you use it, you get 10% leech. Mobs inside to take extra from you. You have increased mastery, and also your arcane skills reduce the cooldown of it, and Thrash can become an arcane skill, which I'm pretty sure I was going to take that. So it has a pretty low cooldown. On top of that, since you're basically forced into playing Lunar Beam, you're not really playing Raze with this build. And everyone knows, at least if you play Bear, in AoE, if you're not playing Raze, then all of your rage is being spent on Iron Fur. So you remember those bears that would macro their Iron Fur into Thrash and not think at all about their rotation? Well, that's back. You can literally just spam Thrash, Bangle, and Moonfire, do infinite damage, and be super tanky. You have Elun's Favored. So you do increased arcane damage, and then a lot of your damage is arcane, so you're healing a lot from it. The self-sustain is actually pretty crazy. I think Moonbear, after Blood Decay, Moonbear I think is the strongest right now. Next we'll go over Monk. So Master of Harmony is not out yet. We just have Shadowpan. Brewmaster actually felt kind of weak. I'm not going to claim to be like an expert Brewmaster. In fact, I actually progged the pull that I was trying to, solo on all my tanks. It took me like 2 hours, and I finally killed it. It took me about 3 minutes to kill it all. But one thing I noticed, the Shadow Pen doesn't feel... I wasn't really noticing that much. It just feels like a bunch of passive buffs that increase your damage / your stats. No real defensive value. I think the other one will be really strong defensively, but it's not out yet. One thing I noticed, which hopefully is just a bug, Expel Harm and Celestial Brew seem to do extremely reduced numbers compared to live. This might be because I wasn't playing my stacks properly or whatever, but I felt like my self-healing was very, very low compared to what I've seen Brewmasters on live. I ended up just kiting out the pull with special delivery and just running around. So hopefully they fix that or buff Brewmaster or whatever. Shadow Pen felt like it was just a bunch of passive damage. Hopefully the other one is more appealing defensive-wise. But like I said, not exactly a brew expert, so we'll see how it shakes out. Paladin. So for Paladin, I actually know it was healing for less. So Word of Glory, on my live character, Word of Glory, the tooltip basically is 1/6 of my health bar baseline. On alpha, it's 1/19. So basically, Word of Glory relative to your max health is healing for 1/3 on the alpha right now. This could be because of weird gear scaling. We're kind of bis in a late season on live, and we're compared to just leveling gear on the alpha. So hopefully this is just some sort of bug or scaling issue. We'll see. For Paladin, I was super looking forward to Templar, but it turns out Lightsmith is actually the stronger of the two for now. Holy Bulwark was bugged, so it's bugged because the shield you put on an ally doesn't work. But the shield on yourself actually feels insanely strong because, as people who play Pro Paladin know, every bit of trickle healing is very, very strong because you're kind of a DR tank. Ideally, you don't have to wog yourself, especially with the new wog, which does freaking nothing. So this Holy Bulwark was very, very noticeable. Also, after checking a log, the sacred weapon that you get from this was just randomly doing 40% of my damage, so it's incredibly overtuned. You also get a new weapon enchant, which is kind of nice. And you do get some free wogs, but like I said, wog was doing almost nothing, so it wasn't really that noticeable. One thing that I think will be super effective for this in high keys is that you can shield an ally. You can just pick one person in your group, you'd be like, you will never die. Because even though it's bugged on PTR, if you just pick Holy Bulwark and just put it on them permanently, it's pretty freaking hard for that person to die. They have a 30% shield for the whole dungeon. It's wild. So that's Lightsmith. If Word of Glory gets fixed / buff / whatever, I think Paladin is looking pretty strong with the Lightsmith tree. So Templar is something I was looking forward to, but actually ended up being quite a big letdown. Basically, this makes it so your Eye of Tyr generates 3 holy power, and then you can also flip that. It can be used a second time to cast Hammer of Light, which costs 5, so it's net -2 holy power. But one thing I also noticed is that it's also net -1 extra global, because you have to use the global to spend 5 holy power on Light's Guidance. So oftentimes you would be like, oh my god, I have to build to 5, and then I spend, now you have no holy power, and all you did was just damage. So it felt like I was falling behind a lot on holy power, trying to play Light's Guidance or Templar, the Templar tree. It does give you a small shield when you use Eye of Tyr, but it didn't feel that crazy. Basically, all this tree really does is damage. Gives you some DR, some haste, which is nice. But compared to the off healing that Lightsmith provided, plus Lightsmith actually even did more damage, which was fully passive. Templar didn't feel that strong right now. Hopefully it gets buffed. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I really hope they do something about how clunky it is. The double global tier into Hammer of Light into having no holy power, so you have to rebuild for your next Tier of the Righteous just felt terrible. Playing Divine Purpose did help a little bit with this, but you had to have a proc, and if you didn't have a proc, it just felt terrible. Anyway, on to Warrior. So Colossus actually felt like the stronger of the two. I think most of that is because of the passives. People were excited, by the way, about this Shockwave knockup Earthquaker, but one thing I noticed is that whenever I used Shockwave to knock them up, they were stunned the whole time they were knocked up, so what's the point? Anyway, you might as well just take the increased stun. I guess it would go through DR, which is kind of cool. The whole shebang of this is you have an ability called Demolish. When you use it, it does a decent amount of damage. And you take and deal 10%. You take 10% less and you deal 10% more to all the enemies that you hit with it, so basically the whole pack. So that felt pretty strong. It was like a pretty major cooldown. It also did a lot of damage itself, like the actual ability cast. But the most noticeable difference was that this has Muscle of Mountain of Muscle and Scars, which basically makes you 5% more damage and 5% less damage. This is actually insane for a passive for one talent node. Like, people thought Sanctified Plates was crazy. This is like even crazier in my opinion. So yeah, this Colossus just felt super, like, it just made you feel like you were overpowered when you use this, especially when right after you use Demolish. It was extremely noticeable how much less damage I was taking and how much more I was doing when I used it. Mountainth is the one I was super excited for. I think Mountainth is just under-tuned right now. When I actually checked a log, the Lightning Strike was doing like less than 5% of my damage, which is kind of sad. Thunderblast was kind of up there. It was like 10%, but a lot of these hero trees are doing literally like upwards of 35%, so this kind of felt underwhelming, which was sad. I was really hoping Mountainth would be cool, but it just turned out to be not great. One super noticeable thing is that the passive DR we get, so if you look at this, Thunderblast reduces all damage you take by 4%. Compare that to Muscle of Mountain and whatever of the Colossus, is insane. This is 5% less damage and 5% more damage. This is like 4% less damage sometimes, which is like ridiculous to me. This is so much worse. So yeah, this didn't feel that good. This was noticeably less damage and less tanky. One thing it does have going for it though, something that warriors have been missing for a while, is if you notice this Storm Shield ability, intervening an ally grants them a shield that grants them like a massive amount of magic shield. Basically, they're not dying. So on a 30-second cooldown, you can basically make sure your ally won't die to magic, which is super cool. Something warriors have been missing a lot. So yeah, that's all the tanks right now. Obviously, more stuff's coming out, and a lot of stuff's going to get tuned. But for now, Blood Decay felt super strong, both versions. Sand Lane especially felt crazy, super fun to play. And Moonbear felt insane too. Paladin and Brew, hopefully they get some buffs / fixes to their self-healing, hopefully. So yeah, thanks y'all for watching. That's the video. Peace out.